You have to be patient. You have to be willing to listen. Listen to different viewpoints. Take time to formulate your positions on certain things. You don't have to be the one in the room that always is the first to answer something. Think and spend time thinking and reflecting on what's important to you. When you're
Frank, Barry, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Good morning. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure and a privilege. You were actually picked out and tasked with being commissioner of a handful of government agencies after some experience in the public and private sector. How do you actually get identified as a leader that can lead a government agency with the experience you had?
Yeah. Well, first of all, a handful is strong. Two state agencies. So I think that's all anyone could take. Ryan, I think it boils down to really the main reason was an incredible team of people. I've been fortunate to spend the majority of my career working with incredible public servants who just really wanted to do good work, and having the privilege to lead various teams in various settings was an opportunity of a lifetime. But the only way, in my opinion, the only way that you can reach the level of commissioner, which is, again, the greatest honor of your career, if you're in the public service career, to be appointed by a governor to do that is just a huge honor. But you cannot do that by yourself. It was a team of people that really did incredible work that then was recognized by a governor's office or by members of the General Assembly or leaders in state government who said, wow, they're doing some really cool stuff in that area. What's the secret sauce? And the secret sauce was the people that were delivering care.
Yeah, but as a leader, sometimes it is hard to empower people. And it's funny because I was talking to a couple different guests of the podcast, and one of the consistencies has always been empowering people, giving up control to allow your team to take over and do these amazing things you talk about, right? So is there something that you have to do to prepare your team to actually perform at this high level? Or is it something where it's just really putting the right people in place? I mean, what's your mindset around that?
Yeah, and again, another great question. So I think it's a little bit of a combination. One, and I used to not like to talk about being a leader. Throughout my career, that was a little uncomfortable for me to take ownership of that. That came along really over the last probably 10 to 12 years. Early on in my career, the goal, if people were to ask me, what's the number one priority you have as a CEO of a large public company that delivered healthcare to individuals desperately needing healthcare, the number one priority for me 15 years ago was, serving the people. That was the greatest joy that you could get. And you talk about the 15,000 people that you would serve. As I moved into more senior level leadership roles, that kind of had a real competing priority, which was absolutely identifying the most incredible people that were as passionate about serving people as I was, and making certain that you could get them on your team. And so, because if you think about it, if it's one person who has this vision of easy access to high quality care, but the rest of the team doesn't have it, you're not going to be successful. Your job as a leader is to lay out what you hope to have your either company or department do, and then convey that message, and then find the people that can be consistent with getting that message out, because one person cannot do it. And so you're constantly looking for incredible leaders. Just because I was the quote commissioner of the departments, the two departments, we had many leaders in the department who then could lead their team to follow that vision and direction. So at the first department, or even at the local level at a community service board in Georgia serving 15,000 people, we believe that people should have easy access to high quality care. And we really pushed that to the 400 team members that we had. And it was a leadership team that rallied behind that direction, that would talk to, people just out of college, or, care coordinators every day about why that's important. I think the work that was recognized was helping people access that care. And then when you're asked by a governor to be a commissioner of a whole state department, um, we move that along a little bit. Easy access to high quality care, helping people live a life of recovery and independence. And you're then trying to get teams engaged to really focus on that. And so that became a 6,000 team member, with about a $1.5 billion budget, running state hospitals and everything else. So that easy access to high quality care, helping people live a life of recovery and independence. You could ask any of those 6,000 people, what's our department stand for? And that's what they stood for. And they knew what role they played to get that done. And then finally, in the last agency, the Department of Community Health, much smaller personnel, team members, only about 700, but a $17.5 billion agency doing regulatory compliance and finance for healthcare. And how do you get them rowing in the same direction? And it was, focusing on customer service, communication, teamwork, and accountability. And we called that CCTA. And again, you get 700 people that knew what their role was, but it's as you said, empowering them. I can do case management. I'm a great case manager, but I've hired, the team probably had 100 case managers. If I do all that case management, they're going to look at me and go, well, if he's doing it all, why should I have been even hired? And so you've got to give them the tools. And then when I ultimately decided to leave, I'm pretty confident that there were people there that still want to focus on customer service, communication, that case management aspect. So the role of the leader is to really get that message out and get them passionate about it.
No, that makes so much sense. So there's a couple things to unpack here. And the first thing that I want to talk about is, the first thing that you specifically said was laying out the mission or the goal, and then finding people that were passionate about that as well. I had a conversation yesterday with my wife, Lisa, and we talked about whether or not a business owner or a leader was going to be always more passionate about the mission of the company or the company itself than the people that worked for that leader or owner. Mm-hmm. Do you think, and it's curious, you say like, okay, I got to surround myself with all these people that are passionate about this and have the skill set that's required. Do you think that that's true, that the owner or leader is always going to be more passionate? Or do you think that you can actually find people to surround yourself with that at least equal that same level of passion or care about the mission of your company or organization?
I think you can find those people. I think that I thought for a while in my career that I was kind of an outlier. That nobody cares about people as much as I do. Nobody cares about helping people. That feeling of a sense of reward when somebody is able to access the care that they need, and I help them navigate that personally. What became even more rewarding to me than anything was seeing other team members that were on our team who had that same level of passion, and knowing that there was 100 people or 700 people who felt that same way, and that and that as commissioner, I gave them permission in essence, because it was part of our overarching umbrella plan, that was okay to really be passionate about that. A lot of times people are wondering, well, can you even think this way? Yeah, you can, and it's okay to really be passionate about helping people, and you shouldn't hide that. And now, 35 years after a public career is now finished, I feel really good about that. I feel really good that there are 2 dozen people that worked directly with me over the last 10, 15 years that have gone on to become commissioners, that have become CEOs, that have become executive vice presidents of major healthcare companies that learned that it was okay to be passionate about this job and about public service and about helping people. So I think you can find people like that. And I think when you do that, it makes it that much easier. I think after coming in and learning who's who in a department, because you don't know everybody, there
Right.
are some non-negotiables. If you're not wanting, if let's say you're not there yet, but let's say you want to get there,
Okay.
if you demonstrate that you're willing to learn and grow professionally and personally to get to that point of being passionate about it, I think you could make it on my team. But if you weren't, and there were ways that you demonstrated that, yeah, I hear that, but that's really not for me, it probably wasn't a good fit. And it probably wasn't a good team for you to be on. And we helped people find other jobs that may have been more consistent with what their beliefs were. But we needed people who were really, really passionate and saw that there were large numbers of people across Georgia and really across the country who were in desperate need of health care, who could not access it, whether it was mental health care, substance use or abuse, intellectual and developmental disability services, people on the Medicaid rolls, whatever that was, who desperately needed help. And there was a really big reward for you if you helped them get that. It was personal. It was a personal feeling of reward, but it really helped the department move in a good direction.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. There's a perception oftentimes in the public versus private sector, unfairly, that maybe employees in the public sector aren't of the same caliber. Um, and I think a lot of it is just money based, right? You can make a lot more money in the private sector. It attracts people that are driven by money because that opportunity is there.
Yeah.
So how did you find really passionate, high performing people? Like, what were you looking for? I mean, it couldn't just be the passion, right?
Yeah. So there are a lot of people in the public system that money is not a driver for them. Money was never a big driver for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is an educator. Um, we certainly wanted to live a healthy, decent lifestyle, but money was never a big driver for us. And even with my 2 daughters, I have a 21-year-old and an 18-year-old, talking to them about following your passion. The money will come along later, but getting them to potentially get interested in a career of public service is something that we've talked to them about. I do think that there are a lot of really, really, really smart people that work in the public system who have that same belief system that the money is not a big driver. They want to feel a sense of reward. What's your purpose? And if your purpose in the healthcare arena is to help people and you can do that, make a decent living. I think that in the public system, we for a long time have not paid, those entry level and mid manager level people enough money. And I think we can do better. And if we want the public system to thrive in the future, we're going to have to address that issue. But overall, I do believe that there are a lot of people who are just driven to public service. I know people who have had the opportunity to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year who went to the private sector, but found it nowhere near as rewarding as the public system. And I think that there are just people out there. I think identifying them, 35 years in the field, you get to figure out who's who and who has a passion for this and who does a lot of talking versus who does a lot of acting. And I
Oh,
think those are two very different things. You want
how can you
people
tell the difference?
hands on. Do you get people? A great example, we had executive assistants who we would get letters of commendation on from people that had called in seeking access to care, and the receptionist, the executive assistant, or the admin helped them navigate the system, and those people would send in letters. That was to me saying, "Hey, I just want to let you know, Valerie helped me today in an unbelievable way." Now, Valerie was making $31,000 a year, but her passion
Yeah.
for helping people came through. I think you get that from the people that you're supposed to be serving. I also think that um, if you come into an agency where there's been a lot of complaints, for instance, and you're
Mm,
able to get people to rally around a direction of reducing those complaints by doing great customer service and customer care, that's another great way to demonstrate if that call volume of problems goes way down, then you're doing something right, and that means that your team is doing something right. And then you hear from other people, "Hey, I've had a great interaction with one of your team members, and just wanted to let you know." You hear that from other departments. You hear that from governor's staff. You hear that from members of the General Assembly. You hear that from providers um, who are interacting with your departments.
yeah. So it sounds like there's just a different motivation for some people. And I love this idea of being, reward driven, of being fulfillment and service driven. And it's something that I've noticed as I've progressed in my career too. And I've worked with a lot of high performing sales reps
Mm-hmm.
who have walked out on hundreds of thousands of dollars a year
Mm-hmm.
because they just don't feel like, I don't know if it's they're appreciated
Right.
or if they don't feel like what they're doing is furthering a mission that is fulfilling to them.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you look at keeping people motivated that are service driven?
Yeah.
Is it something where you're communicating? And I know that communication is a big part of what you believe in. Like, how do you communicate successes throughout an organization, especially when it's like thousands of people
Yeah.
within the organization?
So I took that in a little different direction when I was commissioner of the two departments and when I was CEO of Viewpoint Health. Um, I think your team members getting to know and interact with either the
Mm,
CEO or the commissioner means a lot to them, and that took some getting used to me, because I kind of just like to go and talk to our team. I'd walk the floors of our building to get to know them, and you sit with them in their cubicle, and you say, "Hey, what are you doing today? Tell me what you're doing," and they would, "Wow, really? You want to hear what I'm doing?" And you'd spend 15 or 20 minutes with them just listening to what their job was, or what they were focused on during that period of time in their career. And then you ask them, "Well, what have you done before this? And what do you want to do in the future? What are your career goals? And how can we help you achieve those career goals, even if that means, you moving from this position to another position?" Showing them, as the leader of the agency or organization, that you care about them, you are invested in them. It's one thing. I was always a little reluctant to have one day a year of employee recognition. Uh, we
yeah,
we tried to build a culture of recognizing our team members every day. Why would you only do that once a year? Why not
yeah.
show them that they're valued every single day? And you show them that by giving them opportunities, again, to grow professionally and personally. we we worked as a team to come up with strategies on that. We developed leadership academies for emerging leaders and senior leaders who were looking to move to the next level, and that showed them, and we paid for that as a department. That showed them that we're invested in them. We care about you. We want you to feel like you're supported. um, and to be honest with you, there were a couple of times where we heard about senior level managers who were not as invested in that approach. And it was really bringing down some of their team members. and we made changes. Even that demonstrated to some of those mid-level managers, wow, they're pretty serious about this healthy work environment where you can grow and thrive and feel like you're a part of something that's bigger than you. That was kind of what we talked to them about, and it was remarkable to see this transformation in both departments that occurred under the administration that played a role in supporting me. And it was just probably one of the most rewarding aspects of a 35-year career in public service, was seeing teams get on board with developing a healthy work environment.
Yeah, it's amazing what the value of time for a leader, for a CEO, for a manager. Quick little story here. So when I was, we had a sales competition at this company that I worked with, and the CEO or the president of the company said, this is a priority for us. We need to make sure that we do X, Y, and Z. And the reward for achieving certain goals in terms of the number one performer in the region wasn't a monetary goal. It wasn't like a bonus. It wasn't a car or anything materialistic. What it was an opportunity to fly to corporate headquarters with a client and have lunch with the owner. Now, this took absolutely no money whatsoever, but the opportunity in and of itself to have FaceTime with someone that was willing to listen, that ran a $3 billion company or whatever it was at the time, was huge. And the people that were on the ground doing the work selling were so much more motivated by that than an extra couple $100 in their pocket for achieving different sales metrics. So yeah, it's crazy just what a little bit of FaceTime will do.
I'm smiling because there was one of my deputy commissioners, you may know her, Lisa Marie. We would talk about the importance of interacting with the team at all levels. And she knew after we started working together how important that was to me. And so, how do I get out to those floors and visit people? Well, then we came up, and it was her idea. We came up with this strategy. We were going to have coffee with the commissioner. I never realized, because it just never was a big deal to me, how important it was for the team to get FaceTime with the commissioner. Take Frank away from it all, with the commissioner. That was really important. If you got time with the commissioner, you go and talk about that. And so she came up with this concept of coffee with the commissioner. And once a month, you could sign up, 15 people at a time. I'd bring in donuts, or she would bring in donuts, or I would bring in coffee and she would bring in coffee. And we'd sit with 15 leaders, not leaders, anybody in the organization could sign up for it. And we would talk about whatever they wanted to talk about for, a full hour, sometimes an hour and a half. Sometimes it would be really significant concerns that they had with the department. Other times it would be great suggestions of how to improve. And it was remarkable how that spread. And over a 4.5-year period of time, we did those every month. How many people requested to come in? The other thing that was interesting was, if you were having a meeting with the commissioner, so I have an open door policy. My door was always open. But what I found was that I'd be meeting with people, and if my door was open, people would walk by my office. I wanted them to walk by the office, and they'd stick their head in. I felt that was great. Well, what I learned, and people taught me, even as commissioner, was, the people that were in the office with you felt offended because that was their time with you. And so their time was being interrupted. So how do you balance being respectful to the people that you're sitting in your office with, giving them that real one-on-one, or maybe it was a couple of people on with me, and not having their time interrupted because everybody else was walking by going, oh, hey, commissioner, hey, commissioner. And so that balancing act. But I think the FaceTime, people want to know who their commissioner is. They want to know what they stand for. They want to know what their beliefs are. They want to know what their CEO believes in. They want to know, what was your career path? When I tell them I started as a case manager 35 years ago, a lot of them would go, "What?"
Yeah.
And they see that there is a career path that potentially can lead a case manager to be a commissioner one day. And then they also got to see we believe really, really strongly in advancing from within, so promoting from within. And usually people kind of roll their eyes at that. I was at one department where my former chief of staff, when I moved to another department, she became commissioner. And we were able to look at those 6,000 team members and say, when we're all rowing in the right direction, good things can happen. And here's a chief, and that usually didn't happen. Here's a chief of staff who's now commissioner, and here's the person that reported to her in her role. And so just some remarkable, real concrete examples of what happens when you engage your team and value them. Again, I'm a big team person. There's no way one person, you can be the greatest commissioner in the world. If you're going to do it by yourself, you will not be successful. It's a team.
Yeah, well, it's a scaling issue in
Yeah.
a lot of ways.
Yep.
If anyone, and you actually hear it in sports oftentimes too. You'll hear guys like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan talk about the fact that, like, yeah, I'm the leader of this team. I'm the best player on the planet, and I could not have won without the team I had here. Because at some point, like, Michael Jordan has to pass the ball.
Yeah.
He can't do everything himself, and he has to be surrounded by people who are competent, who are as passionate, similar to what you're saying, about winning and about, the Chicago Bulls as he was.
Yeah.
And at some point, you do have to pass the ball and let someone else take that shot at the end of the game. And that's what true champions, I think, are able to do. And that's what you're able to do in a way to scale, because you can't do everything yourself. It's interesting, communication, customer service, teamwork, accountability is this CCTA acronym that you just described. And a lot of those are very self-explanatory, but accountability, that's an interesting one. Tell me a little bit about how you think about accountability for yourself, and then also for the people that you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah, great. Again, great question. Accountability was added about 6 months after we came up. We actually partnered with a firm, Ernst and Young, to help us craft our direction. And they interviewed all of the leaders in the organization, and we came up with CCT, customer service, communication, and teamwork. And then what evolved from that was, well, how are we holding ourselves accountable to these things, to these three things? And so accountability was both internal and external. And so, we started to take more seriously the performance planning process. People want to know, what am I expected to do in this job, and how am I going to be evaluated against it? So that's an internal thing from a department standpoint. How am I going to be held accountable so that I'll know whether or not I'm doing a good job? And they want concrete feedback. They don't want to just be told, "Oh, you're doing a great job." They want to know, here's how you're doing a great job. Here are the concrete things that have really paid off. And here are the things that I think you could continue to do to grow, to even do better. And maybe that is getting a certification in project management, and going through this training, or going through a leadership academy so that you can move to the next level. So there's internal with your team. But then as a commissioner, for instance, I wanted to know, am I doing okay? And I would ask my direct reports and others, can you give me some feedback on where I can improve? And so not sometimes people, you think, oh, well, they're just going to tell him what he wants to hear. If you develop that relationship, that's a sincere, real relationship, you will get real feedback. And people will tell you, yeah, you did a really good job in this presentation. So as commissioner, you spoke at a lot of conferences, keynote speaker. How did I do today? Where could I improve? And I would really work with our executive leadership team on, how can I improve as a commissioner? Because if I can continue to do better and learn and grow as a leader, it's going to help the department, which will help all of us. And so, but I wanted that feedback. So that's kind of internal. Externally, you've got a $17.5 billion agency. You've got governors and members of the General Assembly that are giving you huge sums of money to serve people. They want to know, are the dollars that we're giving you improving the health and wellness of the population that you're supposed to be serving? And so we came up with this whole concept, which across the country, everybody's using it, using healthcare analytics to figure
Yeah.
out, are the dollars that you're being awarded going to good use? Can you show us that the people in your care are getting better? Are they having a better quality of life? And whether that was at the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities or at the Department of Community Health, that's what we started focusing on, using data to demonstrate the accountability aspect of all this. And if we weren't delivering high quality care or providing the support to deliver high quality care, we were able to hold each other accountable and say, let's look at this differently then. So it's both internal and external. And accountability was always a little bit one of those that I guess I was afraid of. But once you started to give people the tools that they needed to demonstrate that they could be successful in their job from an internal standpoint, they wanted to do more. And once we started to use healthcare analytics and data and everything else to hold each other accountable, then we started to see more positive impact on the people we were supposed to serve.
I love that. It's got to be really weird being appointed. And you think about, especially you see it nationally probably more. So just because it's public, it's in the news, there's heads of agencies, heads of state that just something goes wrong and they're done, right? They get reassigned, they get let go, whatever that may be. I mean, what was it like leading an agency, being appointed by the governor, understanding that you're under the microscope, but B, there's changes in leadership every handful of years, and you're uncertain of the direction of the new governor, of new legislators. I mean, what was that like?
So when I left Viewpoint Health as CEO, we were serving about 12,000 people. When I was asked by Governor Deal and his team to lead the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, we talked about it as a family. Why would you leave this CEO job to go and work for the state? And even though the CEO job was a public authority, the goal had to be because we can help millions of people rather than thousands of people. So that drive. And so even if you get to do it for a year, you potentially get to shape policy and practice and direction to serve hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Incredible honor. I mean, it's the greatest honor of a career that you can imagine, to be asked by a governor to do that. I loved every single day of being commissioner. When I decided to leave, I left because I was tired. And a governor deserves, after 9 years, a governor deserves to have somebody in that role that's not tired. That they need somebody who's willing to go all in. I was willing to go all in. I just physically got tired. And so I think the role of commissioner is to motivate and to represent and to do all those things on behalf of both the governor and the department. So you get your marching orders, the philosophy of what that governor wants to do. You have to make a decision. Is that consistent with my belief system? Yes, for both governors, it was for me. I lasted for 2 governors. Average lifespan is 18 to 36 months. When I first started, I went to a new agency head directors meeting in DC. You go to a breakfast, they have up on a screen a PowerPoint, average lifespan 18 to 36 months, and you're trying to eat. Jeez. And you're a little worried about that. Welcome.
Yeah.
And then it transitions to, so what do you want your legacy to be? And that slide stays up there. And if today is your last day, what are people going to say about you tomorrow? So you have to act with a sense of urgency every day. But I truly believe that there's no governor that's going to argue that if you as an agency head focus on customer service, how you're going to communicate with the public, you're going to do that as a team, and you're going to hold each other accountable, and you're going to be held accountable, those four buckets are hard to argue with, because they're going to support a governor's direction, really, no matter what that direction is.
Yeah.
I think that the role of commissioner, so that was, almost 10 years ago. It was August 13th of 2012 that I was appointed, and I decided to retire July 31st of 2021.
So this 18 to 36 months, this is so interesting because you and I have talked in the past.
Yep.
And I do know that you're not someone that's driven by career advancement or just monetary gain. And you wonder if, and I don't want to make assumptions about people, but if your motivations, if your goals are to eventually, make millions of dollars or be the head of certain agencies or get elected in public service, if that's your motivation versus the motivation of servitude, of motivate and represent, if that's where maybe that disconnect is, because you did serve a long time, you well outperformed those 36 months. I mean, do you think that it's really because of your motivations and your desire to serve?
Yeah, so I loved public service. I loved it. It was my passion. I loved getting people ready to take on new leadership roles who were committed to public service. And that was a real big driver for me, was supporting a team for them to pursue their career paths in public service. If there were people that wanted to be commissioner, or if there were people that wanted to be deputy commissioner, or whatever that was, helping with them with the career path. I think you're right. The title never really was that important to me. What I learned over the time that I was commissioner was the impact you can have on people. And that could be really, really a positive impact if you wanted it to be. So I think that the 9 years, roughly 9 years of being commissioner, again, I loved every minute of it. What I also learned was you have to be fully engaged every single day. And you're doing a disservice to the agency and to the governor if that goes downhill even slightly. The department deserves to have somebody who is as enthusiastic as I was on day one. I probably made it through about, maybe when I decided to retire, it was probably April, May. So it was pretty quick. And it was, we had gotten through COVID. Well, we got through what we thought was the last round of COVID back in April. And so I felt like the department now is ready for a new leader. And I think as a leader, there are times where you need to recognize that a fresh set of eyes coming in to take it to the next level is probably a good thing. Now, the argument is people like consistency. In the state departments, they like consistency. That's not always the best thing for the department, though. And so you have to be willing to say, I've served my time, gotten it to this level, and now there's some really, really, really smart people who may be able to take it even to the next level and be excited about that. I still, just this morning, was on the phone with the person that took my place. And we talk 3 times a week about strategy, about who's who, about what we can do. And so that transition and demonstrating, not just to the department, but to the state as a whole, what a nice, respectful, smooth transition can look like, really had a positive impact on them too. It kept the anxiety down. It kept people focusing on the work that they had to do of helping people. And she's now inherited a department that's in pretty decent shape.
That's awesome. You talk a lot about identifying and coaching up and motivating and teaching people around you, who's someone that did that for you? I mean, who's like a mentor that taught you a lot of what you believe in now?
So I've really been fortunate. I've worked with several team members that were intimately engaged with the departments that I ran or led, along with the CS Community Service Board. I've worked with some of these people for 20 and 25 years. And so even though I may have been the executive director or the CEO or the commissioner, I was always one of those people that valued input from people that worked with me. So
Mm.
gaining insight. So Commissioner Judy Fitzgerald, for instance, who's the commissioner of the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, a huge mentor of mine. Lisa Marie, you know, she was a deputy commissioner with me, but gaining her guidance on how to do things better from working with members of the General Assembly or communications and constituent services and strategy, she taught me a lot. So just because they worked, you know, let's say in an organizational structure under me, doesn't mean that I didn't value and learn from them, of them mentoring me. I know that may sound odd, but that's how I looked at it. I also had, throughout my career, people that had been in leadership roles that I became close with. Former, used to be called MHDDAD, Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Addictive Disease Division Directors. These were 75-year-old people, members of agency that helped me as I moved along. And I think you have to be willing to acknowledge that you don't know everything. And the more insight and input you can get. And then I had a CFO that worked with me. He was a 40-plus year public servant. And every day he would coach me and mentor me on when to talk, when to listen. You know, there were times early on in my leadership career where I talked too much and didn't listen to our team. And he really pushed me to do more listening. And I think that was probably one of the greatest skills he and I still probably talk too much, but one of the things that he really pushed me on, David Cruz, and we're still, you know, pretty much best friends to this day.
That's really cool. If you're listening to this now and you want to take one thing away and you're just like, what of all the things we've talked about, what can I take away from this? I think this is really powerful. I think it's great to hear that you can look for a mentor, not in someone that has authority over you, but just someone that you respect.
Yeah.
And I can look back at my career and I can say, I did learn a lot from people that I worked for. Mm-hmm. I learned just as much, if not more, from people that I managed. Mm-hmm. And it was different skills, it was different techniques, it was just, there's so much. The quality of people all over is amazing. And you don't have to have a position of authority to be a mentor, to be a leader. I think you can be a leader it doesn't take having people work for you to be a leader. Right. It's an individual thing that you can do and be proud of. It's the way you conduct yourself. It's the way you have authenticity and integrity. Those are all leadership qualities. So it's powerful to hear that from you. One of the things you did say was the question that was up on that PowerPoint was, what do you want your legacy to be? You know, what do you, not just as a commissioner, not just as an executive director at EY, what do you want your legacy to be? When you retire for good and you're sitting on the beach with your feet up on you know, a cooler of water, what do you want your legacy to be?
So, you know, with two children, two daughters, 21 and 18-year-old, that has played a role in my career. I always wanted them to see that there was, if they were interested, a career in public health where you could help people. And so, you know, I think looking back, if the teams that I've had the privilege of working with and leading would say, one, he valued us. He valued us as state employees. He valued us as public servants. He gave us opportunities, or he and his team during the time that they were there gave us opportunities to grow both professionally and personally. That's from an internal team standpoint, that they treated us with dignity and respect and valued us and demonstrated that. Didn't just talk about it, but demonstrated that. Gave us opportunities to thrive in the jobs that we were in and the opportunity to move up from a career standpoint. I'd love that. Externally, from a member of the General Assembly or from a governor or from an individual that was needing care, if they could ultimately say during that, commissioners, whether they remember the name or not, but during that window of time, the way that we were able to, the breaking down of administrative barriers that prohibit us from accessing care were broken down. And that administration really did a phenomenal job, and it continued. So that's the key thing, not just while you're there, but that belief system was so instilled of helping people that continued. And maybe that was the beginning of a transition of a department that would believe in that forever. I'd love that the teams that we had, more than anything, that I'd love for them to say, God, that was a great team. It was a phenomenal team that really supported us. That would be huge.
That's powerful. That's powerful. What would you say to, I always hate asking the question, like, what would you tell your 21-year-old self as you're starting your career? Because I do think that in a lot of ways you have to kind of make the mistakes that you made and you have to come up the way you did. And like, if you ask me that question, the answer is usually just like nothing. Like, just do what you think is right. I don't know. That's usually the way I look at it. So what advice would you have for young Barry Frank, who's coming up and has a desire to serve and grow in a leadership capacity and wants to be successful, wants to be fulfilled, but wants to do so in a way that is built around servitude? What advice would you have for that person?
Patience. You have to be patient. You have to be, as David Cruz taught me, you have to be willing to listen. Listen to different viewpoints. Take time to formulate your positions on certain things. You don't have to be the one in the room that always is the first to answer something. Think, and spend time thinking and reflecting on what's important to you. I think early on, when you're 21 years old, or I started when I was probably 18 years old, working in a school system, working with children with serious emotional disturbance. Back then, you're like, what's next? What's next for me?
Yeah.
What, from a career standpoint, how do I make more money? You're making $17,000 a year. Your rent's $275 a month. Your car payment's $133. You're always, back then, you're thinking, gosh, I'm going to need to do something else to make more money. I think if you follow your passion, those things will come along, but it takes patience. I would also say, find a couple of people that have a little bit more experience than you and reach out to them and see about getting coached or mentored, even whether that's formal or informal. Having people that you can run ideas by, even at 21 years old, is really, really important. I'd say early on, focus on having fun as well. Don't let your job be all consuming. The job's going to become all consuming later on in your career. Spend time having fun and enjoy. I'm working with a young lady who just graduated, is getting ready to graduate, and she just accepted a position with one of the big four firms. And she asked me to be her coach. And I said, I'd love to do that. I'd be honored to do that. And she was asking about how much money should she put into savings. And I said, the savings is really important. We talked about that a little bit. I said, but right now, also enjoy the fact that you've landed this great job and enjoy life a little bit, because you're going to be working for a long time. And so that's probably what I would look back and maybe try to do a little bit better job of for myself.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too, because I do truly believe that if you early on spend time acquiring skills, acquiring relationships,
Yep.
and acquiring experiences, you're in such a better position to be successful later on. I look back at some of the people that I met in my early 20s, and they are like monsters in industry
Yeah.
right now.
Yes.
And we were playing kickball in Piedmont Park, drinking beer on Sundays together. And I know them intimately because I know who they are personally.
Yeah.
Not because, I needed them for a sale or I needed them for whatever. It's because we knew each other. We really, really knew each other. We built a relationship on common ground, on a really true, like, I care about you. I care about your career. I care about your growth. I care about your family. And then just doing things that you might not be able to do otherwise, because you're going to meet all these other people as you come up in your career.
Right.
And if you can talk about college football and fishing and plays and musicals and just a variety of different things, you're going to be able to connect with people at a different level than if you just were just headstrong on your career.
Yeah.
Just go, 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 go. And I think it just makes you such a well-rounded person.
Yeah.
And honestly, sometimes just more fun to be around.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all
really
about,
well.
right?
Yeah, you said that much in a much better way than I did. You're exactly right. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this has been such a fun conversation, and I like to end the podcast with 3 final questions that I ask everybody. Yeah. So here's your final 3 questions. The first question is, what is the most impactful book you've ever read?
Oh gosh. So there's this Robert Fulghum wrote a book, and it's got a bunch of different stories in it, and it's one part of a book, but it's something that I've used throughout my career, and it was everything I needed to learn. It was, if the house is on fire, the box goes with me, and it tells the story about a father whose daughter gave him some things to take to work, and he threw them all away. And make a long story short, those were the things that she treasured most, and he didn't get the message. And at the end of the story, he says, I went and got the bag of goodies out of the garbage bag, and if ever the house burns on, that bag comes with me. And the way I've used that story is, it's okay to be left holding the bag, because sometimes there's no greater reward than being the person who's left holding the bag. And that's not a bad thing. And so I've used that throughout my career when I've talked to large groups or small groups about the importance of not getting frustrated with the fact that you might have gotten dumped on by a coworker for a case that they were working on, but that's probably a good thing, because maybe you can help that person. And so that book by Robert Fulghum was really important to me.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love that. If you could, and I know you don't drink, if you could have a drink with anyone in the world, past or present, who would it be? What would you drink, and why?
So I'm a big water drinker, just for health purposes. I drink a ton of water, so it would be water. And I think you've had an impact on me with that as well, because I think you're following some of your health stuff with how you train and what you put into your body. Water plays a key role in that, and so I've followed that a little bit. I think it would be great. John F. Kennedy comes to mind, and it was because of the leadership that the country needed at the time. He was able to pull so many different people together. Regardless of political affiliation, he had a lot of support from both sides. And I think in today's world, how did you go about doing that? I'd like to hear more about that. And he had to deal with a significant conflict. And conflict has always been something that, has been fascinating. How do you respond during conflict? Do you get angry? Are you a problem solver? Does it cause you to rise up, or does it cause you to, oh my gosh, panic? And he was a pretty steady hand in that. And so I'd like to learn a little bit more about how he handled some of those conflicts that he dealt with. So, both conflict management, and he had to do that, working with people of various political, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, is irrelevant for this part of the conversation. It's that he was able to figure out how to work across the aisle to get people behind a certain strategy, even getting to the moon. I mean, he had the whole country energized about that. So how are you as the leader conveying a message that's so important and getting the whole country to rally around that? So I think that would kind of be my thought on that.
I love that. So the Every Breath Counts podcast, it's all about designing your life to be fulfilled. It's about having gratitude in everything you do. It's about just doing the things you love and doing them to the best of your ability, which is why I started the podcast, because I can have conversations with guys like you, Frank, who are passionate about what they do, that I can learn from and apply in my life. So how do you make every breath count in your life?
So I've been fortunate when I retired. One, I get great joy out of my wife and my daughters and traveling with them. That's a great joy for me. But when I decided to retire, I went to work for a new firm, Ernst and Young, EY. And the reason I did that was to take the passion that I have and some of the lessons that I've learned and be able to continue that work across the country. And so why that's important to me is just because I no longer work in the public system doesn't mean that I'm no longer passionate about it. Ernst and Young has a real passion for helping states, counties, cities do better. If the EY mantra is building a better working world, my role is to help states and cities and counties become high-performing agencies of state government or county government. I get really fulfilled being able to work for a company that has that same passion for helping systems do better. That, I don't have a lot of hobbies. My hobby is kind of work. And so to be able to do that on a national scale is really, really rewarding for me. And to be able to talk to my children about the fact that I get to continue focusing on what's important to me, of helping people gain the access to the care that they need and do that on a national basis, and to have an opportunity to work with a company like EY who believes in that also. That's what drives me.
That's awesome. Frank, this has been so much fun. And I just want to acknowledge you too, because, my wife worked with you for a number of years, and it's always great to see someone like you who has started as a case manager, who then was so passionate about public service and the health and well-being of folks in your community, and to take that to a CEO level. And then not only from there to scale that from thousands of people to millions of people at the state level. And now even scaling further when you're working with other commissioners, when you're really helping create a workplace where other government agencies can thrive, you may be now impacting tens and hundreds of millions of people. So I love the idea of scaling servitude, of scaling passion, and helping others to the highest level possible. So Frank Berry, thank you so much for joining the podcast. And I really appreciate your time. And guys, go out, enjoy your day, figure out what your legacy is going to be, communicate, work on customer service, teamwork, and accountability, and make every breath count.
Thanks, Ryan. It's been a great morning. Thank you.
Ooh.